I want to welcome you here this evening, and those of you who are joining us online, welcome to you too, wherever you may be, whenever you may be seeing this. Don't be afraid to share it, and in fact, we would appreciate that. Tonight, I'm speaking about expecting nothing in return. I pushed the button, but nothing happened, Alan. I guess I expected nothing in return. I did. Okay, Luke chapter 6, verse 35 begins by saying, "But love your enemies." Now, we don't oftentimes think about this. We think of enemies as people who annoy us. We think of enemies as people who don't want to know us. And we think of enemies as people who are probably unworthy of our consideration apart from our dislike or sometimes hate. But Jesus says, love your enemies, and that can get tough, no doubt about that. So, as the little boy standing there says, wait, what? That's probably the response when we really sit down and think about the idea of loving our enemies. But Jesus goes on to say, and do good. And of course, our little boy's response would be, am I actually expected to do something? So it's not just what goes on inside your head, even though it's a good idea to settle down and ask, what does it mean to love my enemies, to want the best for their souls, but actually to do something in order to help them. Now we know that if we were literally at the gates of hell, and our loved ones were just about to go through the gates of hell, we would stop them. And what Jesus is saying is we need to have that kind of attitude towards our enemies. We don't want them to go to hell. We want to love them as Jesus loved us. And of course, Jesus loved us so much, of course, that he died on the cross for us. He gave his life for you and me. And then he says, and lend. Now, before I go any further, obviously, the subject before us tonight is expecting nothing in return. So you can see here the idea of lending to others has a lot to do with this, okay? So I need to tell you clearly, what goes on with you and your money is between you and God and your dependents. And it does matter as far as your dependents are concerned. If God has given you dependents, then obviously you must take care of them. We'll see more about that as we go on in our lesson. But your money is your business. If a person stands before you and starts telling you how much and where you need to be putting your money as far as giving is concerned, you need to be looking at them with jaundiced eye. And then you need to say, that's between me and God. And so a response for our little boy is, he says, is that not asking too much? And of course, Jesus indeed is saying you need to lend. He goes on to say, expecting nothing in return. Now, we expect everything back, and sometimes we even expect interest back if we lend to others. And of course, he says, you mean nothing? Nothing in return? Well, when we give a favor to somebody, we even expect thanks for that favor. And Jesus is saying, don't bother, okay? You need to be giving, but don't even expect thanks for it. Now, how wounded, how offended are we when we don't get thanks for something? Well, sometimes we're a little bit tricky about it. What we do is we don't necessarily express our frustration. We just never give them anything again. That's the way that people operate, and it's not a good way to operate at all, because Jesus is serious about his words here. Jesus isn't just making up poetry for the sake of our ears. He is telling us how to live a particular lifestyle, and this is the Christian lifestyle, so we're to lend expecting nothing in return. And he says, and your reward will be great. Now, if I gave you $10,000, and then I went around telling everybody that I gave you $10,000, Jesus says that I have received my reward in full. What's my reward? Well, your thanks or your praise. Okay? Now, that's why Jesus says you must not let the left hand know what the right hand is doing, so that you will be blessed by your Heavenly Father in heaven. Okay? He sees what happens in secret, and of course, he blesses you and our reward will be great because we're sending, of course, blessings ahead to heaven, or treasure ahead, and of course that will await us. And of course we're blessed this side because God continues to bless us with what we need to give, and whatever the need is before us. Going on, and of course it says here, first of all, I guess this is a cartoon of St. Peter greeting you or me. And he says, first of all, thank you for enrolling in our rewards program. And of course, we do that when we become a Christian. Now, and Jesus goes on to say, and you will be sons of the Most High. And that makes us part of the heavenly host. Okay, we're part of God's family. And here on earth, and of course we're part of these beautiful young people here, of course full of energy and able to get on with doing God's work here on earth. So we're never alone, and that is not God's plan for us to do this all by ourselves. Now I realize that some Christians do believe, and you can tell because people just don't want to go to church these days, or worse still, they feel like they don't even have to, or there's no necessity for it. The fact of the matter is that people honestly believe that they can do it on their own. Christianity is not designed to be something done on our own. It's an impossibility. It cannot happen. We're to work together in all things. Then Jesus says, for he himself is kind. He's talking about the Father. For he himself is kind to ungrateful and evil men. Guess who the ungrateful and evil men are? Well, believe it or not, that's you and me. And Jesus is, of course, God is kind to us and continues to be. Of course, the rain falls down and we have all the blessings of this earth upon us, and he continues to be good to us in all things. And we see the kindness of God all around us. Now, borrowing and lending. Okay, what is the difference? Well, we know the difference because when we go out and we borrow something from somebody, we receive it from them, and of course there's an expectation that we will give it back. And of course when we lend, again, we have something that we lend to somebody else, and there can be an expectation of getting that back, okay? No doubt about that. So what's the difference? Well, Jesus is talking to you. He's talking to you and to me, not the borrower. Now, what we have to do is we have to take the borrower and put the borrower over there, okay, because we're the lender, okay? So he says, but the lender or giver, we are the giver of whatever it might be that the borrower needs. Okay, so Matthew chapter 5, verse 42, give to him who asks of you. And of course, we're expected to give freely. That can be hard to do. Do you know how much it costs to have good things? Do you know how much it costs to run a lifestyle, to look after your family, to maintain the things that you have around you? Well, it can cost a lot. And so when Jesus says, give to him who asks of you, sometimes we freeze and think, I don't want to give. Okay? And so Jesus is confronting us here. People who think that Jesus doesn't have something to say that's not confronting, obviously has never read their Bibles. And Jesus is confronting you with the fact that there are people who have needs out there, and sometimes they're going to come along and ask you, and you're going to be expected to give. So, and he goes on to say, and do not turn away from him who wants to borrow from you. Turn away. Now, I realize that some cultures are better at this than others. They have a sharing culture. Oftentimes the Western mind doesn't necessarily think of sharing. And if they do think of sharing, they think of interest. It's a quid pro quo, something for something. I assure you, that is not Jesus' theology. Jesus' theology is that he gives to us so that we can give to the needs of others. What constitutes lending? And that's a very good question. What does constitute lending? Well, first of all, this is a question here, are we expected to hand over all our cash to anyone who asks? So can I come up to you as a Christian and say, give me all your money, I need it? Well, I can, but I may not get it. And of course, if you're clever, you won't carry cash on you. You'll say, no, I don't have any cash, sorry. And which obviously, there's problems with that equation in both directions, okay? So is our job to make sure the money goes to where it is supposed to go? So if I come up to you and ask you and tell you that I have a need for groceries and you give me $100, is it your job to make sure that the money went on groceries? Well, I think that this can be a yes or no situation, okay? If I'm claiming that I need food, then surely you are entitled to the expectation that I go out and buy food for my family. And I think that that's right. And of course, the idea is that sometimes you must scrutinize. Of course, the definition for scrutinize here on your screen is to look at or verify something minutely, very, very minutely. I'm not sure that it really goes that far as giving is concerned. Sometimes we just got to give and praise the Lord, give, expecting that the other person is going to do the right thing with what's given. What about lending other things? Okay, maybe lending your labor or your skills. Have you ever called a plumber? Have you ever seen how expensive those people are? Maybe you've got some plumbing skills. Maybe you've got some building skills. Maybe some skills just to fix things or make things more beautiful. And you meet the need there. What about tools? Well, that's a mighty attractive looking tool there. Not many people want to lend that out, that's for sure. But maybe you're going to go mow the lawn for the person in need. Okay, and what about your car? Again, that's a mighty nice looking car. If you've got one of those things, then you've probably got plenty of money, but at the end of the day, that's your business, not mine, okay? And your laptop. No, that's not much of a laptop. That's an old desktop. And I think that these days, you'd happily lend that out because you'd be thinking if they know how to use that, good luck to them. But what about your laptop? What about your cell phone? These are serious questions, by the way, and questions that you and I are probably going to have to answer one way or another. Now, here's a rip-off alert, being real, okay? And I think that we have to be real as far as the stuff that we have is concerned, okay? Have you ever been taken advantage of? I know you have. Everybody's been taken advantage of. I often tell the story that I was in the back room and had other people around me. And there were other people working. It was a Saturday, and I'm not sure who they were, what they were doing, but a young lady came into the building. She walked straight up to me and asked me for $20, and I gave it to her. And she walked away smiling. And 5 minutes later, I thought, what happened? I just given a complete stranger $20 just because she said she needed it. And if I ever brag to you that I can't be ripped off, that's just not true. Okay, I can be. She ripped me off. I don't believe to this very day that she had a need. She had a single need in her life. She just came along and she knew how to do it, and she did it well. And so I was taken advantage of. I pray that doesn't happen again. Okay. Now, some people never going to pay you back. Some people will say, I need money for so long, I need this for so long, and you're just not going to get it back. You're going to be ripped off. And by the way, they're ripping God off, not you. Okay? And what about the idea of they stole your property? It wasn't a matter of them coming along and asking. They just took it as though it belonged to them anyway. Okay? They broke it and offered a lame excuse. I've had that. I've been given back broken things. And with broken excuses, lame excuses, okay? They just lied to you, and you're going to get that sooner or later. All right, the 8th commandment says you must not steal. And some people who are going to be great borrowers are actually going to be, like the young girl that I'm suggesting, great thieves, okay? They're not borrowers at all. They're thieves. They rip people off. And there's a story, and it goes like this. Of course, it was during a time of revival in Ireland, and in the Belfast shipyard, they had to erect a special shed to house stolen tools that converted workers were returning as a revival swept through the country at the beginning of the 20th century. So you can imagine the preacher. He's probably Mr. Nicholson in this case. He preaches a sermon on thou shalt not steal and converts these people, and these people are now bringing back all the tools that they have stolen from the shipyard over the years. And there were so many of them that they had to build a special shed for those tools. Good thing to happen, no doubt about that. And I wonder in your life if somebody came and started returning all the things that they'd stolen off you. Now, a number of years ago, I was sold some books that I considered to be very precious, and a brother came along to me, not a Morningsider, by the way, from somewhere else, came along to me and asked if he could borrow those books. He never did return them, and he has long since gone on to his reward. I don't expect to see those books again, ever, this side of heaven. And on the other side, I guess I won't be seeing them either. If I do see them, I'll let you know. But by the way, he did take them and he did not return them. All right? So when is a need a need? And that's a good question, okay? We have to discern needs, okay? Some people are genuinely hungry, okay? They are. And we have to discern that. I've oftentimes told the story when I was preaching in South Auckland. I came over here to visit Gerald, and there was a man who showed up at the back door, and he knocked there, and Gerald invited him in. He gave him a cup of tea, opened a packet of something, fed him, and the guy thanked us very much and went on his way. Not too many years later, I reminded Gerald of that incident, and he had no memory of it whatsoever. Good on him. Good on him. It was just as natural as could be for him to do that. Okay, there are some people who have needs, and we need to meet those needs. I had another man who turned up here, and he had a piece of plastic, and on it there were some black dots, and he was telling me that one of those black dots represented something in his head that the doctor could see that he needed an operation for. I assure you, this man didn't need an operation for anything. His life was disheveled. His car was full of rubbish, and he had no need apart from what he could rip you off. So I did say to him, I said, we do have some cans of baked beans that you're welcome to have. He said, I don't need cans of baked beans. I need an operation on my head. And I said to him, we have some cans of baked beans. We talked about this. We talked about that. And then he did suggest that maybe $10 would help him on his way. And I said, I don't have $10. I just have some baked beans. And then, of course, we talked some more. And he did say, then he finally said, well, I'll take those baked beans, thank you. Put them in his car full of junk and drove off. He wasn't hungry, I assure you. He was just coming here to steal off of us, okay? Now, of course, there are genuinely homeless people. Oftentimes these people have psychiatric problems. They should be in care, but they're not. Instead, they're on the street. Don't be too hard on them, okay? And, of course, there are people who are laden with debt, and it's easy to get there. I always cringe when some people speak about debt as being something that they can't get into. You can. Be careful. Okay? Now, charity begins at home. And, of course, that home is the church. It begins amongst us. Okay? 1 Timothy chapter 5 and verse 8 says, but if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. So if we have dependents, God expects us to take care of them, even if it means great sacrifice on our part. Now, oftentimes when it comes to expecting nothing in return, we can be good at that as far as our dependents are concerned. And we don't expect anything in return from them. Well, we can do that beyond the home also. But charity does begin at home. And all the good food that we, of course, come together and when we have our fellowship lunches and the likes, it's a good thing. And Does that mean no junk food? Well, that's up to you. Okay. 2 Thessalonians chapter 3 and verse 10, Paul is dealing with brethren who have sat down and are literally waiting for the Lord to return, thinking that they don't have to do anything, okay? He says in verse 10 of 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, for even when we were with you, we used to give you this order. If anyone is not willing to work, then he is not to eat either. People have to be about their business, providing for the needs of others. And of course, in the case in Genesis chapter 18 with Abraham, and of course it's remembered in Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 2, it says, and do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by this some have entertained angels without knowing it. So be hospitable, okay? And finally, here's a young lady who's just come up out of the waters of baptism. In Galatians chapter 3 and verse 27, Paul says, for all of you who are baptized into Christ have clothed yourselves with Christ. You know, Jesus gave, okay? And what we give in return is faith, and of course that faith expressing itself in works of love. And when we get about our business and get on helping other people, then of course we are indeed blessed. But we're blessed already, so give, expecting nothing in return. I want to, wherever you may be tonight online, God bless you. Say to the audience here tonight, God bless you too.